is try an approach where maybe you start with something smaller. Maybe you start with something that's more achievable. Start with something that may in context seem very simple, but just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Earrings Off. We want to invite you to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. You can find us on Facebook at Earrings Off Podcast and on Instagram at The Earrings Off Podcast.
Welcome to Earrings Off. I'm Lou.
And I'm Teresa. Let's get started.
Well, hello, Kari, and welcome to our show.
Hello, Teresa. Hello, Lou.
Hi.
We're going to jump right into the questions. And this particular one, I couldn't wait to ask. I just want to know, how does one go from being a tech executive to being a wellness entrepreneur? How do you make that leap?
Yes.
Yeah. Not clearly related necessarily. But Teresa, I think you have a kind of a similar story or background a little bit, so you might resonate with this a bit. But yeah, I worked in tech for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in marketing and communications and account management and kind of worked my way into the executive leadership team. And, I very much had, the career that, on the outside looked very successful. But internally, I was constantly saying to myself, okay, well, maybe once I get to, this certain title or this certain promotion or amount of money or company or whatever, then I'll be happy. And of course, that was never happening. Right. And all the while, I was really allowing my own health and wellness to take a backseat to my career, which I think a lot of people, we allow that to happen to us. We have long days. We don't, take breaks to, eat lunch, let alone sometimes like allow ourselves a bathroom break. Right.
Right.
We're traveling a lot, client dinners, drinks, things like that. And, I really was trying my entire career to manage my health and wellness in a better way because I didn't feel at home in my body. I didn't feel good about myself. And, I did a lot of extreme restrictive approaches, that would work for a little bit and I would see some results, but ultimately they were never sustainable, never maintainable. And so then I would, fall off the wagon, so to speak. And then I'd tell myself, oh, well, if I was just more disciplined, if I would, just worked harder, then I would be able to see results. And so then I would go try some other, crazy extreme diet or workout program or whatever. And the cycle would constantly repeat. And so, I spent 15 years doing that. And then COVID hit, which I think, was obviously very challenging for a lot of people, myself
for
included.
sure.
And at the beginning of the pandemic, it was like, oh, food and booze, these are my friends. Like this is, the joy of my life right now. Right. So, all of the habits that I had that maybe weren't necessarily great or really serving my wellness, just got worse at the beginning of the pandemic. And so one day, I woke up just not feeling good and, just feeling really lethargic and again, just not at home in my body. And I just said, what are you doing to yourself? I don't want to live this way. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to constantly be spending so much energy worrying about what I'm eating, how much I'm working out, what I look like, what size I am, the number on the scale. I'm so tired of the mental energy that I spend on that. And I know that I have to do this differently and in a way that's going to be maintainable and sustainable and foundational for me for the rest of my life.
Right.
So I went on, a journey of really educating myself about how to do that. A lot of, just building awareness and kind of doing a lot of mindset work to start with, why do I treat myself in these ways? And, through that journey, I was able to lose 30 pounds and really transform my relationship with food, my relationship with my body. And I realized, okay, well, there's a reason why this career in tech, while, I was very fortunate in many ways, I was never truly happy and passionate about it, because this is actually my passion. This
Mm.
is, I feel, my life's purposes. I'm experiencing so much freedom having gone through this journey, and I want to help other people experience it as well.
Mhm.
So I made the leap to leave my old job and, kind of take the plunge into entrepreneurship and building my own wellness coaching business. And so here I am.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
So, Kari, tell us. So, we know that you pursue goals and make changes, but what have you learned from the goals that you've already pursued?
I think that the biggest thing is that if you're doing something over and over and you're not ever achieving the goal that you want to achieve, maybe try a different approach. And that sounds very obvious to say it.
Yeah.
But many of us are very stubborn. And I think a lot of my clients, and myself included in this, we're high achieving people, right? And so we think, oh, I'm a goal-oriented person, I can achieve these things. And that may work in, some contexts of just kind of, white knuckling yourself through it. But I think especially as it comes to your health and wellness, and I also am learning now on my entrepreneurial journey, you can't just white knuckle your way through everything. And so if you're trying over and over again, the way I was, 15 years of trying these restrictive approaches and it was never working, maybe try a different approach. And I think what people are often hesitant to do is try an approach where maybe you start with something smaller. Maybe you start with something that's more achievable. Start with something that may in context seem very simple, but just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy.
Right.
And, start with those smaller steps, and those small steps, if you just focus on making those small steps every day, they will add up to such significant change. You will look back and not even recognize, who you were then. But, I think it's so funny how so many people resist that idea of kind of going slow to go fast.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can change that, approach, if trying to do too much is not working for you, which for most people it doesn't, that's where you can really start to see some actual progress. So I would just encourage anyone who's listening to think about that. Why am I continuing to do something that I know is not really working?
Yeah.
Right.
And you know what, though, but that's so important, because many times we continue to do the same thing because that's what's safe. It's like we get comfortable with this particular strategy, even though we know it's not working.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's kind of, I always say, if you want things to be different, you have to do things differently.
Yeah.
And so really reflecting on how can I do things differently versus just, wishing that things were different.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, we say, I think you said it earlier, it's not, it sounds easy, but it's not simple. That is really, really hard. That's really hard to do. It's that whole mindset change is so key and important. And that's where the real work comes in, right?
Exactly.
Changing your mindset. But
Yes, exactly.
So tell us about Knock, the company that you created. So can you talk a little bit about Knock?
Yeah, absolutely. So I founded it with another woman, her name's Stephanie, and we have a very similar story, except instead of working in the tech industry, she worked in the wine and spirits industry. Mm-hmm. And so arguably another, very another industry that's not very conducive to your health, right? And so, she went on a similar, kind of career path and trajectory, and also simultaneous health and wellness path, and, found herself in the same place. And so she too, kind of solved this for herself and decided, okay, I want to help other people solve this too. And so we ended up finding each other just through the magic of social media.
Mhm.
And
Really?
yes,
That's something.
yeah, I know. It's really, really, really crazy. But so we ended up connecting and realizing that we have, a lot in common, really similar background and passions. And, because both of us came from a place of, our jobs were not conducive to us being very healthy. We really have a passion for how can we be more well at work? Because it's not necessarily that realistic for people to say, oh, just work less. I mean, to be fair, some people probably do need to work less. Many people probably do, right? But realistically speaking, we spend so much time at work, either virtually or physically or both. And how much of that time is really conducive to your well-being? Not very much. And, of course, there are other solutions out there. Companies give their employees access to a meditation app or, $50 a month to go to the, have a gym membership. And all those things are great. Those are great tools, but it's not solving the problem holistically of why, our workforce in general is so unhealthy and so burned out. And so she and I decided to create essentially the solution that we wish we would have had when we were in that situation, and something that really gives us actual support from another human. Both of us are certified wellness coaches, and so we really believe in the power of wellness coaching to do a deeper level of reflection and, kind of get a different level of support than you would maybe do on your own. That mindset work that we talked about, that's where a lot of that, comes to the surface. But also, some tools to kind of, give you, whether you're looking to lose weight or you're looking to decrease stress, or you just generally want to be healthier on a day-to-day basis, some tools that can actually help people do that in their day-to-day life, and with the realities of the demands of their workplace. So that's what we've created is basically an organizational wellness solution to help people with that. And it starts from the leadership all the way down to, every level of the organization, because we believe that if the leadership isn't bought into it and the leaders aren't well themselves, there's no way that the rest of the company is going to be well, right? So it has to really be a value that starts at the top, and then is kind of carried out in the day-to-day for everyone else who works there.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So, Kari, how do you manage stress? And how are you being proactive about protecting your mental health?
Yeah. So stress is funny, because we think that stress is a mental thing. And it can be a mental thing because, we can have thoughts and feelings about the stress, but stress is actually a physical reaction in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people don't realize this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is because, in cave people times, when we had to be prepared, when we, sensed a stressor and we had to be prepared to either fight off that stressor or run away from it, right? The fight or flight that we've all probably heard before.
Right.
Our body needed a bunch of energy to do either one of those things. So when we sense a stressor, our body is kind of, turning all of our energy systems on to get us ready to either fight off the stressor or run away from it. So it's, adrenaline, cortisol, all those things that give us a bunch of energy. And that worked in, cave people times, because then we would fight the thing off. And then, we would calm back down, or we would run away to our, village or whatever, and we would be safe and we would calm down, and, we would kind of close that stress loop, so to speak. But now in, modern times, we're faced with so many stressors every single day, right? Like we wake up and, we look at our phone and an email pops up that makes us stressed. And then we are, driving to work and there's traffic and that makes us stressed. And then, the coffee machine is broken and that makes us stressed, right? Like we're faced with so many stressors, and we don't give ourselves the opportunities to close that stress loop in the same way, to let our body systems kind of come back down to homeostasis. So if we're not doing that, the way I describe it to my clients is kind of like, think about all of those stressors. If you're not doing things to proactively, close those cycles, you have a bunch of open stress tabs on your browser, right? And every single one of those things is like an open stress tab that you haven't closed. So we have to really proactively focus on closing those stress tabs. We can't just try to convince ourselves, oh, it's fine, or, oh, everyone is stressed, or, whatever. That would be, because it's a physical reaction, that'd be like convincing yourself, if you have to go to the bathroom, like convincing yourself, oh, I don't have to go to the bathroom. Like, no, it doesn't work that way, right? Like, it's the same thing. We have to deal with it physically. So the ways we can deal with that are either movement, because that's doing something with all of that energy that's been created in our body. So that's why movement is a really, really good stress tool, because it kind of convinces your body like, okay, we've done something with this energy. We can kind of come back down to normal. Or doing something that makes us feel really safe, so that we are kind of convinced that we've, run away from the stressor, and we can, kind of calm down and feel safe now. So those are going to be things like breathing, so taking deep breaths, because imagine, when you're stressed, your, breathing is probably not super deep. It's a little bit, lighter. So taking deep breaths, that kind of convinces your body, oh, okay, we must be safe right now. Otherwise we wouldn't be taking the time to breathe. Or spending time with a loved one that makes you feel safe, or a pet. Or doing things that kind of get you into, kind of a flow state where you kind of lose all sense of time. Again, because it's tricking your body into thinking, oh, we're safe right now, because otherwise we wouldn't be, doing this thing that's a total like leisure activity. So for a lot of people that might be, playing an instrument, or, coloring, or something artistic, or reading, things like that. So it's really important, most of the time when I ask my clients, what are you doing to manage stress? They're like, nothing, just dealing with it. Right.
Yeah.
And, it's no wonder then that we're all walking around chronically stressed, because we're not closing any of our stress tabs. So, for me personally, I do a mix of all of those things. I'm also a fitness coach. And so I really, love movement and believe in the power of movement. And for me, movement is absolutely just as much about the mental benefits as it is the physical benefits, frankly, if not more. And it, sometimes that looks like a really, intense sweaty workout. And sometimes that looks like a walk, or, some gentle yoga, or whatever the case might be. I'm a huge believer in breath work. I'm a huge believer in meditation. But I really try to intentionally kind of, live in integrity with what I'm coaching my clients on, and really help people understand you have to close all of those stress cycles. You have to close those stress tabs, and doing something proactively to solve it. So that's kind of how I think about it, and, how I prioritize it for myself.
I do love that explanation. That was real good. Thank you for that. So let me ask you something. How do you define wellness? And actually it's a two-parter. Is it the same for everyone?
Yeah. So I think when I think about wellness, I don't know if I have a clear definition.
Mm-hmm.
If it is, if it is more so almost like a wheel, and there are different pieces of that wheel, right? There's physical wellness, there's mental wellness, there's existential wellness, there's financial wellness, there's environmental wellness, there's relational wellness. All of those pieces, I think, are really what make up a whole person, right? And if any of those pieces are out of whack, it's really hard for us as a human to really truly feel well. So, and everything is connected. So the reasons why we make decisions in one area are typically because of something that's happening in another area, right? So if let's take an example, if you're, choosing to, stress eat every night, it's probably because you're stressed about, something happening with your kids or your job or, money or something like that. It's not because, you just want to blindly binge on Doritos or whatever it is. I mean, don't get me wrong, Doritos are delicious sometimes. But it's typically because there's, something else going on. And also vice versa. When our health is out of whack, that can affect, our relationships or affect, how we feel about our place and purpose in the world. Right. So I think it's, I know that's not a clearly defined thing, but I think it is really about all of those different pieces and elements that make up a whole. But what feels good for each person, what feels, well for each person in each area, I think that varies dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think even just taking the time to really think about how do I feel about all those areas in my life? And, going back to our original conversation about, okay, so if I want to change something in one of those areas, what are some small things that I can start to do? Right. And, starting to kind of right the ship, so to speak, in any one of those areas is going to pay dividends in the other. And it's going to help, improve the whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Thanks. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Kari, what's a commonly held belief that you disagree with?
I would say that more complexity is better. So typically, a lot of people, and I think just scroll through Instagram and you'll see this. It's like, the problem is that you're eating, I don't know, watermelon, or, you shouldn't eat after 7 p.m. or, your workouts have to be programmed this exact way, or, here's the magic key to, breathing or whatever. There's so many different methods and approaches out there that, are that create a lot of complexity or, want to create a lot of complexity in terms of how we manage our wellness. And in reality, most people, like, that's not really, the watermelon isn't the problem, right? Or the bananas aren't the problem, right? It's really about, are you fueling your body with whole foods? Are you eating protein and veggies and carbohydrates and fats? And are you eating them in the right amounts? Are you sleeping? Are you managing your stress? Are you moving your body every day? It doesn't matter, what the best workout is. Are you just moving your body? We want to make it so complex. And I notice this a lot with clients when they first come and work with me. They say, well, should I be eating at this certain time? Or like, what foods am I allowed to eat or not allowed to eat? And I'm like, let's not even go there yet. Like, we need to build the foundation. And it's just like building a house, like building the foundation, that's not the most fun part of building a house. It just kind of looks like a giant hole in the ground and it takes a long time, right?
Yeah.
But without that foundation, you can't get to the fun part of, then putting up the walls and getting the, fixtures and appliances in and, picking the decor. Like, you'll get to all of that, but none of that is going to work, unless you have that foundation built. And I think people really, they want it to be more complicated because they think that, that's the reason why they haven't achieved whatever they want to achieve. When really it's just, again, it's these things that are simple, but they're not easy. But they're really foundational to just taking care of yourself. And so I think, if you find yourself, or if you notice, someone trying to convince you that you have to take this very complex approach to your wellness, I would just be wary of that. And I would ask yourself, do I even really know like what I need to eat every day? And if I know what I need to eat, am I actually doing it? Am I actually sleeping enough? Like, ask yourself some of those basic questions. And if the answer is not yes to all of those, I would focus on that first.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
That's great advice, Kari. Thank you. Yeah.
Mhm. Can you share some practical nutrition and fitness advice?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think building on what I was just saying, I think that for most people, they would benefit from eating more whole food sources. And I am not someone who, says that certain foods are good and certain foods are bad. I believe that all foods can have a place in a diet.
I
It's
do
more
too.
about most of the time foods and some of the time foods.
Mhm.
And so most of the time, we want to try to be eating foods that are more whole food sources. And the reason for that is not that processed foods are, the devil and, they're terrible and whatever. It's just simply that you're going to get much more nutritional bang for your buck from those whole food sources. If you think about how, when you digest food, that's basically your body's way of processing food. That's another way to think about it.
Mhm.
So if you're eating something that's already been processed before it comes into your system, your body doesn't have to do as much work to process it. So that food is, stays with you less. It's kind of like in and out. And then your body's like, okay, I'm ready for more, right? And there's probably nutritional value that was processed out of it before you consume it. And so that's why, I always give people the example of imagine how you feel after you eat an entire potato versus imagine how you feel when you eat a bag of potato chips, right? You're very full after you eat a whole potato, versus a bag of potato chips. It's like you could sit there and eat them forever, right? That's kind of the difference.
I don't know, but by the time I eat the whole bag, I'm full.
True. Maybe we're talking about what
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Size bag. The snack size bag. But yeah, so you want to think about focusing on those foods that are more whole food sources.
Mhm.
And that's the reason why. It's just going to give you so much more value and your body's going to get so much more from it. You're going to feel full longer. You're going to have more energy. You're really going to notice a difference. So that is something that I would say is a very easy thing that people can work on. And you don't have to go from one end of the spectrum to the other right away. You can make tiny little steps, right?
Right.
So if your, go-to dessert is Oreos every night, think about what is a more whole food version of a dessert, right? And so maybe you work your way towards, berries with whipped cream and chocolate sauce on it, right? It doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of thing.
Right.
So that would be one thing I would say. The other thing is, just don't be afraid to eat all of the food groups unless you have an allergy or you have something that you don't like. Protein, carbohydrates, fats, and vegetables, they all have a role for our bodies. They all, play an important part in helping our body function at its best.
Mhm.
And I think we've got, we've had so many marketing messages about, carbs are bad, fat is good, all of these different things. And, really what you want to strive for is the majority of your plate is protein and veggies. And then some of your plate is carbs and some of your plate is fats. It's going to be different for everyone. But generally speaking, if you're kind of building your plate with protein and protein and veggies is the foundation. And then another, quarter of your plate is carbs. And then you're kind of filling out the rest with fats. You're going to be doing pretty well. So I would say those are kind of practical tips that will be appropriate for pretty much anyone, no matter what your goals are.
Okay.
Nice.
All right. Well, thank you, Kari. Those are all of the questions we have for you today, but would you like to share some parting words to our audience, with our audience?
Yeah. One of my soapbox topics, I guess, is, I think we often get stuck where we are because we think that it's going to be really hard to change. And what I like to offer people to think about is that yes, it will be hard to change, but it is also hard to stay the same. It is just a matter of choosing which hard you're willing to deal with, right? Because if you're, like I was, a few years ago, not feeling good in your body, not liking what you see in the mirror, not liking the number on the scale, not feeling good every day, that is hard. Living that way is hard.
Yeah.
And, it is also hard for me to, prioritize all of those things that I just said, we should be focusing on with our diet, and prioritize moving every day, and prioritize stress management. It is also hard for me to do all of those things. Yes, of course, it's gotten easier over time. And as I figured out the, mix of habits and routines that work for me, but, it still takes intentional focus. But I am so much happier with choosing that version of hard versus the, previous version of hard that I was kind of just letting be chosen for me. So if you're thinking about, making a change, and I think that's applicable, whether it's, your physical health and well-being, whether it's, financial, whether it's, your job, or, whatever it is, yes, change is typically hard. But is it, a change that you're willing to make that trade-off for? Because sitting where you're sitting right now and being unhappy with it is also hard too. So that's what I would just leave everyone with. And if you're, looking for any more content or information about that, or along those lines, I share a lot of, my kind of mindset tips, practical fitness and nutrition tips, things like that on my Instagram. So that's at Kari Brownsberger 3. And then you can also find a link to my website there, if you're interested in talking to me about your goals and how you might be able to get there.
Okay. Well, Kari, thank you so much for sharing a lot of great information with our audience. I know that they are going to greatly benefit, and we're going to benefit as well. So again, thanks for joining us here today on Earrings Off. Take good care.
Thanks so much for having me.